watching Jesse. Oh. Greg.
All right, we're ready when you are.
Your daughter turned this thing off.
I'll call the City of Escalon Planning Commission meeting on November 19th, 2024 to order. Please have a roll call.
Yes, you can, and I'd like to apologize for the correction that needs to be made to the agenda, that our commission chair, as of the last meeting, is Steve Castellanos, and our commission vice chair is Mike Dunbar. And so we will take roll call. Commissioner Van Dyke?
Present.
Commissioner Sarkozy?
Here.
Commissioner Willis?
Here.
Commission vice chair Dunbar?
Here.
Commission chair Castellanos?
Here.
Thank you.
At this time, let's have the pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to ask that anybody that has a cell phone, pager, or other device, if you could please put it on silent or vibrate, unless you are a on-duty emergency responder. Is there anybody online or?
We have our consultant
Okay.
for the item number 2.
The next item on the agenda would be the consent calendar approved of the minutes of the June 19th meeting. Is there any discussion, motion?
I move we approve the minutes for the preceding meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is item 1, which is the Liberty Park specific plan and fee program.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Jalen French. The item before you, as was read, is in regard to the Liberty Business Park specific plan area fee. In short, the Liberty Business Park specific plan, which was drafted and approved many years ago, 2007, called for the creation of funding mechanisms for infrastructure, including a plan area fee. In simple terms, a plan area fee is a way to ensure that all infrastructure across the larger area than one developer should be or could be responsible for is improved. The aerial in front of you here is a highlight of the specific plan area north of State Route 120, east of Brennan. It's about 180 acres, 178 acres. We do have one development moving forward. I'm sure you've seen construction. It is 20 acres in size. Obviously, you know, that individual should not be responsible for putting in infrastructure for 180 acres. So we collect a fee, a proportional share fee across all the infrastructure so that when we have enough revenue, enough money to install the infrastructure, we can do that. Or as development comes, if they want to install the infrastructure, they can use it as a fee credit. So in essence, that's what the plan area fee is. If you think about a singular development, you know, a development of 1, 5, 10 acres with only one property owner, that developer is responsible for putting in all the infrastructure. But in a specific plan area like this, you have many developments, many developers, and so you collect a fee to eventually install the infrastructure with the revenue collected. It does seem like an additional fee on top of development. It may seem that it is impeding, economic development, job producing growth, that type of thing. But again, every developer, every development will have infrastructure costs. And so this is the way that they realize these infrastructure costs, not doing them themselves necessarily, but paying this fee. You will see other pieces of note. You will know in the specific plan there are industrial uses, there are office uses technically, and there are commercial uses. You can see here on the conceptual plan done in the specific plan in '07, the red frontage along 120 is commercial. Some of our zoning has the entire area along 120 in commercial. The commercial fee, the plan area fee, is higher than industrial fee. And that's really because a large portion of the infrastructure is transportation, roads, that type of thing. And the commercial draws many more trips and therefore has, a bigger impact on the development than the other uses because of the trips that it drives. And so you need, more roadways or wider roadways, those types of things. And that is why the fee is higher. Of course, I think cities generally want to see industrial uses, of course, because they produce jobs, but especially commercial uses because they generate sales tax revenue. And so one could say, well, you're sort of disincentivizing commercial development. That may be true, and the council has certain levers that they can pull. For instance, they could charge a lesser fee than adopted, because that's kind of a maximum fee. They could, if they wanted, and I don't want to paint anyone in a box here, but they could collect a lesser fee to sort of stimulate and encourage the commercial development. So there are options beyond the adoption of this plan. The downside, of course, of collecting a lesser fee or not charging everything you should is you're really kicking the infrastructure can down the road. Every development that comes in is not paying, its fair share, and then you get to a point eventually, perhaps, where you do not have enough revenue to put in the infrastructure you need, and you're somehow behind the eight ball. Not enough water, not enough sewer capacity. You could even get to the point where you sort of can't develop there anymore. So there's this balance between charging the right amount of fees and sort of disincentivizing development. So just lay that out there for the commission and for your consideration. Technically, I don't think we have to bring a fee like this before the Planning Commission. It is our approach to do so, to allow robust conversation, whether from the public or through the commission discussion about these types of things. So important for us. This is, in relation to a planning document, a specific plan. And so we wanted to bring this plan area fee before you. I'll just make one other note, and I think it's clear to the development moving forward. We are sort of behind the eight ball here. Ideally, we would have had this fee adopted prior to the beginning of construction, prior to the first building permit being pulled. We're not there, various reasons. We don't need to get into that. But and I believe staff has been clear on this, the expectation is that once adopted, if adopted, every development that move forward, even those that are already moving forward, would pay this plan area fee, again, to ensure we have adequate funding for the infrastructure necessary there. And so this item is seeking a recommendation of the commission onto the city council to adopt the plan area fee. With that lead in, we will turn it over to our consultant, EPS, who prepared the report and specifically the tables that you have in front of you. and he'll kind of walk through, how the fee was derived. So we'll turn it over to Jess.
Thanks, Jalen. And hello, all. My name is Jess Stevens, and I'm a senior associate at Economic and Planning Systems. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, EPS is a land economics consulting firm experienced in the full spectrum of services related to real estate development, financing of public infrastructure and government services, as well as land use and conservation planning and government organization. As Jalen mentioned, we've been working with city staff to prepare the development impact fee nexus study for the Liberty Business Park. And I'm happy to walk through these discussion tables with you all tonight. I think if it's amenable, we'll walk through the tables and then I can address any questions that may arise at the end. And great, so I can see what Jalen has on the screen. Great. So this analysis essentially serves, as Jalen highlighted, as the basis for allocating the costs of infrastructure improvements intended to serve the Liberty Business Park as a result of the increased demand from the new development, and in this case, as a result of the build out of the Liberty Business Park. And so tables 1 and 2 really provide an overview of the land uses described in the specific plan. And combined with the infrastructure facilities and the associated costs of those facilities, this land use plan and those other two components serve as the foundation of this analysis. So if you want to maybe go to table 3, Jalen. Great, thank you. So table 3 is the program fee summary for the specific plan area by component on a per acre basis as well as a building square footage basis. And as Jalen highlighted, the fees are estimated to range to a varying degree between $32,000 for the rail-oriented industrial use to upwards of $77,000 for commercial uses on an acreage basis. And if you want to, next slide. Thanks. So table 4 similarly highlights the fees estimated on a per acre basis and also demonstrates the total costs of the infrastructure for each component that are included in the program. And it validates that the fee revenue generated by the program would be sufficient enough to cover the costs of the infrastructure that's required to serve the new development in the specific plan area. So for example, the fee, the total cost of roadway fees is approximately $4 million. The fees collected by the fee program, if it were to be adopted, for the roadway infrastructure component would generate approximately the $4 million in revenue and would cover the costs of the infrastructure for the roadway infrastructure. And so as you can see, it goes down the line for each component. And also included the administrative fee that serves to cover administrative costs that the city bears in implementing the fee program. So tables 5 through 9 really detail, table 5 is a summary, but then 6 through 9 detail the total costs of the infrastructure that would be included in the plan area fee program. These were specifically taken from the specific plan and provided to EPS with those updated costs. And so this analysis has the costs at 2024 dollars and are estimated at $2024 for what those improvements would be. If you want to continue to maybe table 10, thanks. So this next section, tables 10 through 18, essentially detail the relative demand and the cost allocation process for the fee program. So as Jalen sort of provided in the overview, at a high level, the plan area fee program takes the costs that are associated with the infrastructure facilities that are required to serve the demand generated by the new development. And those costs are allocated across the various development land use types based on the relative demand generated by those land uses. And then the net result is the estimated maximum fee that can be charged to the various land use types or developments. And John, if you want to continue maybe to table 15, my apologies. So there are two ways really that the fee program allocates the total costs of the infrastructure. And that's on a relative demand basis and on a simple per acre basis. Sort of going back to that roadway costs or the roadway fee that I highlighted earlier. For example, there's approximately $4 million in costs for roadway infrastructure improvements. And the costs of the roads are allocated across the land uses, so light industrial, rail-oriented industrial, commercial, and office park. They're allocated across those land uses based on the relative demand or the number of trips per land use that's generated by those different land uses. As Jalen mentioned previously, the different land uses generate different demand. So commercial has a higher trip rate than light industrial or rail-oriented industrial. And as a result, that land use has a relative cost allocated to the land use type based on that relative demand. And if you want to go to the water cost allocation or sewer, yep, thank you. And as I highlighted as well, or the alternative allocation process is on the simple per acre basis. And this is a result as the demand being the same across uses. So for water improvements, every land use has the same demand. In this case, there's 2,000 gallon per day maximum demand for water for each land use. And so the costs are allocated based on the total acres of the land use types within the fee program, resulting in the same fee across land use types. So I think those are really the main points that I had hoped and wanted to highlight. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Jalen, and or I can address any questions.
I think staff or Jess are here to answer any questions the commission may have before we go to the public.
You have any question, Mark?
So, yeah, one question. So you mentioned this was in 2024 dollars. What happens if we've got one development out there now? What happens, we approve these, these amounts are to the council. How does that get escalated into 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah, if we don't see development in the period like we did the first time between '07 and '24, we would definitely update it, similar to what we're doing here. But we can include a CPI type escalator in the fee if that's what the commission and the council wants to see.
And I would just add, sort of equally as important, that would be to be included in the fee program nexus study, so the report document, as well as the ordinance that would be passed to implement the fee. So it would be that CPI increase that could be conducted annually would be detailed in both those places.
This is somewhat related. It's stated on page 12 that the study will be updated every 8 years. Is that rigid? Could build out necessitate an earlier examination and change, or possibly put off another couple of years, revision of this study?
Yeah, I think, so this sort of state law assembly bill wants to see them, updated periodically. The council has the discretion to update again. We'd go through a process, we'd hire a consultant, they would update it to current dollars if something changed. So it's not super rigid. It's kind of a guidepost.
And also on page 16, it mentions hotels, that it's not mentioned again, and I don't remember seeing in the original specific plan. It's up under phase 1.
Yeah, it's a commercial
This
type,
is table 2.
commercial type land use.
Yeah, hotels? Is that something in this specific plan?
So I'll just say that it is identified as a commercial use in the specific plan, but I can't speak to if that use
If it will take place?
yeah.
Okay. Okay, so back to, you talked about $2024. So I'm looking at page 20. We're talking about striping, widening, installation of the lights and whatnot. So if it's put off, it's going to be altered. If it's years in the future, the prices will have to be adjusted.
Yeah, they can
That's
be,
correct.
they can be formally adjusted through an update to the fee study, the Nexus study, or sort of informally, I'll call it, adjusted through a CPI escalator, something like that.
On page 22, under additional improvements, says ungrounding. Don't we want to, is that the correct word there?
Maybe undergrounding?
Maybe it's supposed to be in grounding with an E?
I'm going to go with undergrounding.
Thank you. Okay, that's all.
Yes, I have a few. The first one is my own, perhaps my own ignorance. I had to look up what a FAR designation was. And I'd like to know, apparently it's important because we're including it here, but we didn't include it in the 2007 original study. So what is the use of FAR and why are we using it here?
And I'll let Jess answer that.
So the FAR is the floor to area ratio
Right.
Of commercial development to like the total acreage assigned for that land use. And so it is in the specific plan. It just isn't highlighted specifically, or it might not be detailed in the specific plan. But essentially, on 1 acre, there is 43,560 square feet, but you wouldn't build. If, for example, a commercial development wouldn't take up every square foot of that acre. And so for density purposes, in terms of calculating how dense the development is as it relates to the acreage based on the land use type.
Yeah, it's basically a way to determine density or intensity of a land use and is sort of used as a metric to calculate the fee, but also determine, again, the intensity. So more intense uses are likely to draw, more things and maybe have to pay a higher fee in essence.
So it could be used to essentially recalculate the fees.
It's sort of an underlying factor, I would say, right, Jess?
That's correct. Yes.
I just wanted to make sure I understood it. So I was looking at the 4 different classifications that we have. And what mechanisms does the city have for making, or the city staff have for assigning a category to a proposal? I mean, if I'm coming in with a proposal, I can tell you it's going to be rail-oriented industrial, because my fees are going to be about a quarter or a third of what they would be if they were commercial. So are we going to do that?
Yeah, good question. The process would go just like any other application for various reasons. I guess someone could do, kind of what you're indicating. Hey, I want to pay a lower fee, so I'm saying it's, this land use. But we verify the project description, what they put in their application, against what is allowed in that area under the general plan designation, as well as the zoning classification. If it doesn't fit, we should not allow it. So they couldn't sort of, trick the process in that way.
So it's basically just up to staff, is what you're saying. We don't have a set criteria. It's proposal by proposal.
Proposal by proposal, it's a staff review process to determine that the proposed project meets the specified land uses within the designation and zoning classification.
I was also a little concerned with the daily trip estimates. I mean, phase 1, 14,400, and then up to, I believe, 33,133 in phase 4, and which is 120% higher than the original. And so I'm looking at this thinking, where did we get these numbers actually? Because in my mind, 120 is already just slam. There's a lot of stuff going on out there in terms of traffic.
Yeah.
So how did we come up with these numbers? Is this from the state? Is this from Caltrans that we got these?
Yes, you want to?
Yes, so the trip rates were specifically taken from the most recent edition of the ITE trip generation manual, which is the 11th edition. ITE is I am forgetting the I, but it's Transportation Engineers manual that establishes trip rates based on varying land use types. Those land use types, Table 10 has the ITE land use codes. So this takes the PM peak hours for each land use to calculate the net new trips. It's highlighted in the specific plan's EIR that the most recent trip generation manual should be used when calculating or allocating costs. I do know that the specific plan, the original total trips, was that number that you had highlighted originally? I think it was that 33,000 figure. Trying to find the...
And as Jess is looking for that, so ITE is the Institute of Transportation Engineers. ITE is an international educational and scientific association of transportation professionals who are responsible for meeting mobility and safety needs. So every use is going to be different. What, as Jess indicated, you have these sort of benchmark or guideline trip generation rates based on the use. And then Jess and his team will take those trip generation rates, the number of acres expected in phase 1, phase 2 across the land use to generate an estimated trip count so that we can factor in the fee. It's not going to be, I mean, it's an estimate, right? It can't match exactly reality, but it's an estimate used, it's a tool used to generate the fee.
I understand the process. I mean, I've seen this before, but what I'm questioning is the underlying assumptions about the trip numbers, where they started from and where they're going. That's kind of where I'm at, and which brings up my next question, which in establishing these fees, we're actually putting higher fees on the uses that would supposedly or presumably generate more trips. But in other areas that we've seen, heavier trips do more damage to roadways than frequency. If you look at the city of Patterson, for instance, where they did nothing to improve the roadbeds. The roadbeds deteriorated very quickly and they had to get a bailout. So I'm wondering if our underlying assumptions about simple road numbers or trip numbers are the best way to serve our community so that we don't end up with quickly deteriorating roadbeds around this development as we have larger numbers of trucks, large trucks coming and going. That would be both on 120 and, as we learned in our previous discussions, some of the people who are locating here intend to use different roads as access. And again, those roads are certainly not set up for the heavier trucks. So have we put enough into this to help us facilitate improvements in those roadbeds? That's my question. That's my real question. So
Good. So some of that question was kind of leading towards long-term maintenance, it sounded like.
establishment.
Yeah.
Roadbeds, that's an establishment. That's something you do at the very outset.
Okay, so design, if we're going to improve Brennan, widen it, sort of construct it for this development, we would do that through engineering, and we would have a sense of what type of trips are going to utilize that road and how many. And so, yes, in the design process, we would ensure that it had a sufficient roadbed to take the weight and the trip load that we thought was going to be generated.
Isn't this the design process, or isn't this what we're, using as the underlying factor for the design process going forward?
Not exactly, right? We are trying to generate a fee to pay for the ultimate road. Could one say you're not collecting enough fee to design a proper road? I mean, I don't know if we could get there from here. But the sense is, yes, we are collecting ample fees to provide the sufficient roadway. And that would be determined during design, the sufficient roadway.
There have already been some questions about escalation of cost. And I looked at a couple of things, at some of the costs that we already have. And I see that, for instance, in 2007, this is on page 23, line 2, the cost was $107,250. The new cost is $177,965. But if you go to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, you find that and you use their calculator, and perhaps that's not a good calculator. I mean, construction, I think, probably has its own calculators. And if indeed that's the case, then I'd like to know what they are so I can rework this. But it shows that we're actually a little bit higher than we should be, which kind of surprises me because, first glance, I don't know if we're high enough. But, so what calculator are we using to get from 2007 to 2024? It would be Jess, I assume.
Well, Jess did,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So I would have to confirm with Bill and the city's engineer, but I believe that it was the CCI index, the construction cost indices, that is different than the indices that you referred to. The CCIs are often, they have regional CCIs, so they factor in costs for California as compared to other states. They even have indices for just the San Francisco region versus Los Angeles. So I would have to follow up and confirm which indices was used.
Okay.
But industry practice is that the construction cost, it's the CCI indices that are used to escalate costs in these instances for fee programs.
Yeah, and the CCI increase is referenced on a number of tables. So I believe that is the correct one.
And there were a couple of other things. I find it interesting that we are looking at, charges to connect to our water system. I think they amount to about $275 for this entire project, $275,000. But then charges to connect to our sewer, or maybe I got it backwards here. Sewer system is going to be $275, but the water system is going to be $3.7 million. So if we've got that much more effort going into providing water, seems to me we got to get rid of that water. So I'm just wondering how we arrived at the 275 as opposed to something higher. Again, I'm just wondering if that is, how does that look at what we're planning as a city going forward? That's my question there.
It does. We factored in the infrastructure needed to serve this area, total that up in today's dollars, and then we've gone through the process to determine how each land use type would pay for that.
My final question had to do with administrative fees. If you go back to page 17, the chart on page 17, I think that's table 1, or table 2, I'm not sure. One of the early tables. It's on our page 17. And we,
Table 3.
yeah, we have a 3% administrative fee. I'm just wondering why administrative fees are based on the size of a project or the scope of a project rather than just fee? I mean, is there that much more work involved, or is that what we're trying to account for? How did we arrive at 3%?
I'll let Jess answer the 3% part. Just industry standard.
I will have to confirm that maybe 3% may be what the citywide impact fee program charges to implement the citywide fee program. That's what the administrative percentage or the administrative costs are. Oftentimes jurisdictions, will choose to implement sort of this similar administrative fee into their specific plan fee programs. Larger project areas, you could consider that larger project areas, large specific plans that have a lot of infrastructure costs, that have a lot of development, do have more administrative effort required into the implementation of the fee program. And so it is industry standard to set it relative to sort of the total cost of the infrastructure of a fee program. The specific percentage varies by jurisdiction and fee program.
Say it varies, what kind of range do you normally see?
I have seen a fee program of 5 that has an administrative percentage of 5%. I believe I've typically seen between 3 and 5. But I would have to go back and consult additional studies to provide a more accurate range.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any specific questions necessarily. I was just more curious because in the packet, I don't know that I don't have the previous to compare if there was a previous version of this. And I guess the other question that I would be, is it expected that this would go back to the project that's currently underway? And that was they were informed of that prior?
They're here. We believe we informed them. Yes, in the conditions of approval in other places. So this is a new fee for the development out there at Liberty Business Park. So there's not a past. Any reference to, $2007 was actually in the specific plan itself. And so, there were some costs associated with the infrastructure needed. We have updated those fees. So one could look back at the Liberty Business Park to kind of look at those dollar figures. And yes, it is staff's intent that this is applied to every development within the Liberty Business Park, if that's what the commission and the council so choose, and even including the current development that's going on right now.
Is this the only development receiving notation specific for these type of fees? Or is there a broader going into the plan?
So this fee is for the specific plan area, and we have one development currently moving forward in the specific plan area. We have not received another application for a development within the specific plan area. But, you know, the most recent project approved, Countrywood Cottages, for instance, didn't have this. They are putting in all of their infrastructure for their single development. This is a specific plan area. So we're charging a fee to ensure that we have the infrastructure available for the entire 180 acre specific plan area.
And is there a deadline to the construction of the infrastructure once fees are paid?
No, you know, we'll have to see how development comes in, subsequent development. Excuse me. You know, there's sort of loose state law, I guess, that, you know, cities can't hold on to these fees forever and not implement the infrastructure that these fees were meant to pay for. But we got to have a critical mass of revenue to be able to put in the infrastructure. So, you know, it's a balancing act, right? It's not going to be in before the first development, certainly, you know, maybe not the second or the third, you know, but eventually we get to a point where there's enough revenue where we can start putting in, you know, the infrastructure needed.
I just see specific references to Caltrans and the stoplight that everybody is talking about and wants very badly. So I definitely see a benefit to having a budget slated for that. But I wouldn't want that to impede the actual progress of that happening. So is there an issue with that being listed, specified to this?
No, in fact, it's sort of zeroed out in this plan area fee because it's covered in the citywide development impact fee. So we've been looking at it recently again. New development is responsible for 23% of the cost of that intersection. And I think that like will surprise people. Like, what does that mean? How? But new development can't pay for existing deficiencies, right? So the calculation has been that the existing deficiencies are whatever the reverse of that is, 77%. And so new development will pay 23%. And so we will calculate through the development impact fee, the citywide development impact fee. And Countrywood, for instance, will pay their fair share in the development impact fees. But these that are closer will have a bigger impact. And so the development impact fee sort of represents a relative responsibility. The projects nearby will have perhaps an additional responsibility. We have to do that calculation, determine if they have an additional responsibility.
Is there an estimate based on these rates for that specific project?
The signal project?
No, for the project that's currently in construction.
Oh, what their fees would be? So if they are the light industrial, 48,792 per acre times 20 acres is
A lot of money.
near $1 million.
And the stance of the city is that they were notified that these may come out a year later?
Yeah, I mean, you can ask them, but yes, it's in their conditions of approval.
In the plan from 2007, under specific plan financing, deposits and payback agreements, I have a note here about the city will do fiscal analysis and determine bonds. Is bonds an option to cover the infrastructure, or have we discounted that, or we're waiting to see how this plays out, or?
You know, I don't know this specific reference. If that was a laundry list of the potential options, or if it was, you know, one that was considered, you know, there's pros and cons of bonds, just like anything else. I think it can still be considered, you know, generally, well, I won't say generally. There's pros and cons. It's not considered at this point.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it can't be considered down the road.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? I need some clarification on, development fees are gonna pay, you said 23% of the cost of improving that intersection?
New development is responsible
New
for.
development,
Yeah.
okay. So on page 20 of the draft, table 6, it shows a signal at 120 in Brennan, in 2024 estimates, a zero cost. If you go down to the next one, the intersection of 120 and Walnut, there is money in that account. And then, so I'm wondering why Walnut has money set aside on this and not Brennan, which to me is more of a critical intersection at this point, especially with the new development.
Yeah. So what you can't do in impact fees is double dip. You can't double charge a developer for an improvement. This intersection, Brennan 120, is covered in the citywide development impact fee. And, you know, if you charge a fee across the board for that, they're paying for it twice. So you sort of net out what is being charged in the development impact fee citywide versus have it in here. There's different ways one could do that. You could put a total in here if it made everyone feel better, but you'd still net out what was being collected in the development impact fee, so this would look nominal.
That just kind of jumped out at me as a zero.
Yep, now we get it.
And I have just one other question, and just on, let me see what page that is. That would be on table 1, talking about the square footage. So that is based on the FAR ratios, correct? So those numbers are the maximum square footage of each of those use types, unless there's a specific, or what is it called? Planned development in that development?
Yeah. I don't know where the question's going. I mean, I would say
Well, just-
maximum or
Yeah,
or
well-
estimated.
Well, yeah, okay. Because if the square footages are different, it may impact all the calculations down and all of the different charts. That's where, kind of where I'm going at.
Yeah.
Or is it not material?
What's material to someone is maybe immaterial to another, and vice versa. Anytime you have a fee study like this, doesn't mean it's going to exactly match reality. But you're in advance of development, and you're making certain estimations on what's going to develop in phase 1 or phase 2, and what the mix of use of commercial or industrial. And so really I'm trying to come up with the right word. It's the industry's best practice to determine these fees. Now, if something materially changes, something happened and it was all commercial, right? We rezoned to all commercial, we'd have to come back in and redo this study because something has materially changed. If it's little, you're not gonna necessarily, even though technically it would, change some things down the line, you're not gonna go in and update your fee. It's close. So I guess that's the best answer I have.
The last question, and this might be a Jeff question, is once there's, say, 4 or 5 developments in the project, and the square footage or the land use changes a little bit, does that impact the need to update the specific plan, or would we wait for the 8-year timeframe if nothing else drastically happens?
I mean, I think we'd wait for that timeframe.
Right. I will open up.
I have one more
One more,
question.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Sorry. I'm just trying to understand what we're gonna have as options here when this conversation part ends. And especially because, I mean, they're here and the project is, did they pay impact fees already based on the 2007 schedule?
Not the 2007 schedule, no. They have not paid the plan area fee
Okay,
yet. no.
okay. And when we get to the recommendation part, can we specify when this takes effect? Or a recommendation as to when this takes effect?
Yes,
Okay.
if the commission thinks it needs clarification,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay,
And remembering that the commission is making a recommendation onto the city council, and the city council can take it.
yeah,
or
they can
not.
light it on fire, yeah. Okay, I'm
Any
good.
other questions?
No, good, no.
I will open up to the audience for comment.
Good evening. My name is Matt Weber. I represent Weldway and the Yates, Mr. and Mrs. Yates. Couple things, just procedurally, doesn't seem like there was a lot of notice given. I know you publish your agenda like you're required to do, but it doesn't seem like notice was given to the affected property owners who probably don't look at the agenda every week, and it seems like that would be appropriate, maybe to try to get more notice out so you could have a more robust conversation about that. We have some major concerns about the fee, and I'll get into some of those. But the first issue is it doesn't appear that there was an actual nexus study done to determine what the impact of the development's going to be. In order to adopt a fee like this, you need a nexus study, which would answer, I think, some of the questions that were being asked by the commissioners earlier. To see, okay, when the development happens, what is necessary, what is needed? And it appears you took a 2007 specific plan and just updated the amount, but used that 15-year-old specific plan that nothing's happened until now with development happening of one, and updated the costs, but you didn't do an actual study to determine if this is built out, what are the impacts on the roads, what are the impacts on the water and the sewer. And we think that that would actually make this fee open to challenge and likely illegal. We think that the fee is exorbitant in relation to the impacts. I think that Mr. French indicated that on my client's parcel, it's $1 million on top of the fact that they haven't paid all the fees yet, but they've paid, just for one of the buildings, a partial fee was over $200,000. And there are multiple other fees that have to be paid. And so ultimately, what's happening here is you are making development nobody's going to develop out there if you're charging $80,000 an acre on top of having to buy the property and build your project. And so I think that if you did a nexus study, you could better refine that fee, make it more defensible for the city, and also likely get it more in line with actual costs and actual development. There's a generic fee based on acreage. Again, a nexus study would have to do an impact based on the actual development. You don't have that. You're just charging a fee based on acreage. Whether you're developing the whole acreage, you're putting a small building on that, large building, there's no tie to what's actually happening out there. You also failed to account for the impacts of what has already been placed on my client. My client has obligations, has a development agreement. It's required to develop sewer and water. And there's no indication in here about, how that plays out and how that impacts. You're still proposing to charge him $1 million. In fact, he's doing a lot of this work, and that's not taken account into the impacts. It appears that there's discussion about a signal on 120. It's my understanding that the city for years has indicated that it can't actually put that signal in because that's Caltrans, so I'm not sure how that plays out. There's no assurance that whatever this money is collected for, as far as we can see in any of the agenda packets, that it will be held for that purpose. There's no indication that it goes into a special fund or anything. It just, there's nothing in the agenda to indicate that. And lastly, I think that the fee, I think everybody will agree that, and you can ask anybody, that fee will impact and kill any development. It'll make it so unattainable and so much cost. And I think there's better ways to do that, which is if you could get the other property owners involved and you can get a nexus study going, you're likely going to be able to bring that down as opposed to just kind of blanketing across. And so we do have serious concerns, and we would ask that this commission send it back and maybe try to do a better study, more defensible study, and something that's more in line with actual costs that would be incurred. So, thank you.
Can I? Do you want to? I was going to.
Go ahead, and then I have.
Okay. I want to address those. In terms of the notice, given we could have done more to get the notice out to property owners of the area. Again, this is sort of an additional step that we are taking, and we did very clearly provide notice well in advance to the immediately affected property owner and development. We have prepared, EPS has prepared, and these tables represent the nexus study. It is an official nexus study. We do not, at this point, have the written report. The written report would just tell you in narrative form what the tables tell you. That will be available for the city council. So we do have a nexus study. We have gone through the nexus study process as part of this. If the fee is exorbitant or not, again, that is in the eye of the beholder, right? And we certainly recognize and I don't want to say don't want to discourage, but there needs to be the balance between ensuring that the city has ample infrastructure and, so charging an appropriate fee and not, sort of discouraging development. So we can weigh from a policy standpoint how we want to handle the fee, but from a technical standpoint, and Jess can jump in here if he wants, this is the math. The math is the infrastructure needed divided in general by the number of acres in the plan area. It's, in that sense, relatively simple math. The indication of the development deferred utility agreement, this is a fee across the entire specific plan area, the 180 acres, 178 acres. It's not specific to the development that is immediately before us, and so therefore there wouldn't be a note about how that would impact. We do not yet know how this is going to move forward. Mr. Yates signed with the city council a deferred utilities agreement. In essence, the city has allowed the deferring of utilities, not needing to connect, like most projects do in the city, not needing to connect to water and sewer, allowing the use of a private well and a septic system until such time that you can sort of generate revenue through the business and then pay for that infrastructure cost that would be borne up front. If the fee was collected and no development moved forward, therefore no additional fees were collected. And per the deferred utility agreement, Mr. Yates needed to put in the infrastructure. Any fees paid would be credited against the installation of that infrastructure. If, however, this is sort of the catalyst to future development, and there's a couple of projects that move forward, more fees are collected, the deferred utility agreement basically states there's then kind of the shared cost with the other developments that move forward, and certainly with the fees collected, and those would be credited too. So while not specifically stated in this document, because again, it's across the 180 acres, that is something that is required by law. Again, we cannot collect fees outside of the impact that is generated by a development.
I just want to jump in and add, similar to what Jalen had mentioned at the beginning of that statement, is that this table set is simply, it was brought forward to begin a discussion as to what the math says behind the nexus. This is not what would be brought forward at the time of ordinance adoption. So for the fee program to be implemented, it does need at least a 30-day notice and posting of the full nexus study, and the fee calculations would need to be posted prior to City Council adopting, if they chose to adopt the fee program, any fee program. That's what the state requires now, is that 30-day notice. And so the full report with the written nexus findings would be posted for the public at least 30 days prior to any sort of adoption. I can't speak to really, the details of the specific engineering costs, as it's not my area of expertise. But the costs are allocated across all improvements, and based on sort of comparatively the city's sewer master plan and water master plan, the demand for the various, even though there's differing land use types, the demand generated by those land use types were identified as the same demand in the city's master plan for water and for sewer. And so that's why there isn't a differentiation within this fee program. But there is with the roadways, because there's a differentiation in the demand generated by land use types specific to roadways.
Just to put a fine point on Jeff's first point there, again, this is sort of an additional step that we are undertaking with the Planning Commission. From here, if the Planning Commission says, yeah, this is in a state, we want to kind of move it on to the City Council, we would, as Jess indicated, release the full Nexus study for a 30-day review, and then get on to Planning Commission. So at this point, we would not, to Council. At this point, we would not get to Council before the last meeting in January. So that's just roughly the timeline. It could be later, of course, but it could not be any earlier than the second meeting in January, after that was out for a 30-day review.
Anybody else in the audience would like to speak?
Hagen. Seems like you don't have all the information that's going to be available. I would sit up there, and I would table it till you get everything. that is going to be sent to the city council before you send it to them. You're making a decision based on less information that they're going to have going forward. So that's just an observation. The specific plan fee covers only the utilities. Is that what we're looking at?
Roadways.
Well, then can we go back to the lights, Escalon, or excuse me, the 120 in Brennan, where it said 0? Okay. I see differences between what's being presented here versus the specific plan and its verbiage. And we've kind of gotten away from going with whatever the specific plan says. For example, light industrial. What is light industrial? You know, light industrial is not what's out there right now. That's heavy-duty industrial. So fees, you know, subjected to light industrial probably should be expanded upon for heavy industrial. And at some point, you need to modify the specific plan to include that type of manufacturing, because it doesn't include that now. I would ask that all of the water and sewer infrastructure, is that including the jack bore connecting from Escalon city limits currently going from Brennan and Oklahoma underneath 120 to Liberty Park? Is that included in those fees?
Yes.
Okay. It would seem to me that you could use today's numbers, not using a calculus, to exactly what that is. I mean, and Mark, I'm surprised you're not bringing this up as a project manager. It costs, I think somebody said 3 years ago, $2 million to jack bore under 120. They just pulled a number out. So you multiply it times 2. Well, those numbers obviously are going up exponentially, just like all construction costs are. The piping, the equipment, you know, the insurance for all these people going through there. I don't know that you have a true number. So if you're going to apply a specific plan fee, I think it needs to be more modernized and see a better fee. As they said, it's kind of a guesstimate. And, you know, I don't have a lot of time here, so I'm going to try to hit a bunch of these things that have been brought up. Escalators don't work. Oh, come on. Cost of living. Cost of living isn't the cost of construction, right, Mark? You've got to have, Mikey brought it up, and you're right. You've got to have that implanted into these fees and fees going forward. You can't use an escalator. I mean, that works with maybe people's wages and so forth, but not for construction costs. They're right to bring up, and thank you, Diane. Diane printed out that utility deferred agreement there, and I'm willing to hand it to whomever of you would like to see it. And it obligates the company here within 5 years of beginning process to tie into the city utilities. That's going underneath the roadway. So if you're taking all of that money, or those costs, excuse me, and putting that on them additionally, that seems like a double charge. So I don't think you have enough information tonight to really do that. I'm more than happy to hand you this so you can read it yourself. It's page 2 in there. This isn't the only fee that these guys are going to get. Are we going to go to a CFD on this Liberty Park or city services?
There's a chance if the city council adopts a CFD.
Okay. So you've got the CFD fees, you know, police, fire, these kind of things. In addition, they're like LLD fees. And in fact, in the Liberty Park specific plan, LLD fees are called for the storm basin. So you have a potential of 3 fees for this development out there. So there's there's things to consider here, your nexus, the fees, this cost of construction going forward, and 8 years, you know, I don't know, because of the type of business that's out there now that really wasn't zoned for, that you're going to get some of these other type of businesses, you know, beating down your door. You know, fees are fees, but, you know, want to be next to something like that is different. I think there was a mistake made at the time because nobody was looking at the actual zoning for it. It was kind of shoved through. I'm a longtime Escalon resident, and I've been there, and I've been to a lot of meetings there, and I see how things go forward. But you have time. There's no rush here. These fees do not have to come in overnight. Get all the information you can, and before you go forward, before you send it to the city council. And again, if any of you'd like to have that deferred utility agreement, I'd be more than happy to supply it to
Why
you.
don't you just pass them on up?
I believe we saw it when the first
We did.
application came through.
But I don't have it with me.
I think I have 5,
Agreement.
but I didn't want one.
Then you have it.
Yeah, so somebody else.
Get you another one.
Get one. Yeah,
There's
thank you.
4, so you can determine.
Hello, my name is Roxana Gonzalez. I work for the Yates family. And I just had a couple quick questions. So I could be mistaken on this, but it looks like the original impact fee was estimated at like $6,600 an acre. Is that wrong?
Jess, do you know that?
So is that, I'm not sure if that was stated in the specific plan document as a potential estimate of what a fee could be. I'd have to go back and take a look. But if that is the case, then that fee is based on the total cost of the $2,007. So it's not been escalated or it's not in 2024 $4. It's in that $2,007 based on the costs that were estimated in 2007.
It just seems like, and I shouldn't speak for Greg, but, you know, we were aware that there would be fees for the development. I think the addition of over $1 million in fees took us by surprise, especially considering some of the things like Matt mentioned with the traffic lights. We just had a fatality last Monday on Highway 120 in Brennan. I don't know if you guys know that. It wasn't in the police beat. But we've been told for decades that the city has no control over the highway. According to this, it's 43% of one corner of that intersection's responsibility to put in a light. We have 75 new homes being built across the street. Are they going to be responsible for a portion of this traffic signal? Is Caltrans going to be responsible for a portion of this traffic signal light? And I appreciate the fact that you're taking additional steps to discuss this. My instincts, having worked, you know, for a construction company for a while, is that a lot of times private individuals can do it better, faster, and cheaper for less money than putting it out to public bid. I think that we could have possibly had a conversation about some of this, especially in regards to the deferred utility agreement, which the first thing that was checked on was whether or not this project met the zoning requirement for the business park, which it does. We met with the city manager, and that was confirmed before any meetings, any contracts, or anything else was done. The Yates family has taken a huge risk with this property being the first development. They're locals. If you go to the high school games, you're going to see their grandkids on the teams. They sponsor the school sports and the league sports. I just hope that this is something that can really be looked into and fine-tuned in a way that's going to benefit the project that's going right now and also future development, and especially, the residents of our town. I think that the rate, especially for commercial, is more than what was being asked per acre for it for sale a few years ago. And to me, that is just not acceptable. So that's all.
Just address a couple of items here. The deferred utility agreement from the prior speaker, most of you have it in front of you. I have it in front of me. It really was intended as an economic development tool. You see here in the recitals, kind of towards the bottom, there's a recognition that extending the infrastructure across the highway would pose, it'd be cost prohibitive and would prevent further development of the property. So there was this allowing of this deferred utility agreement for economic development purposes. So now that we're kind of clear on that side, in section 1.2, connection to public water and sewer utilities, it does say developers shall remove and or properly abandon the septic system and design and construct a permanent connection to city utilities at its cost and expense with the earliest of 3 different options. At the earliest of within 5 years of on-site utilities being constructed, so we're close to that or just past that. So, we're close to that 5-year window starting or just past. Or number 2, 180 calendar days from date of receipt of written notification from the city that the sewer and water lines have been extended to the specific plan area. So I think the prior commenter was, sort of framing this as a responsibility agreement versus a deferred utility agreement. B clearly says if the city were to, for whatever reason, however, extend the infrastructure there, then the project proponent who signed this would have to connect within 180 days. Or 3, within 2 years upon the approval of any development permit other than the developers within the specific plan. So that's what I referred to earlier. If there's a second or third that comes in, right, there's 2 years to connect. And so ostensibly you have the first one, Mr. Yates, the second or third or whatever, come in and they are now sharing these costs. So this deferred utility agreement, in our minds, jives 100% with a plan area fee. One way or another, we're going to pay for it. If we do not have a plan area fee outside of extending water and sewer to this project, we have no ability to collect fees outside of the development impact fee for this specific plan area. So the internal roads, the internal water, sewer, the monumentation, the other things, right? There was a pond at one time, we're probably not gonna have a pond. The other infrastructure within there that is needed is paid for through this fee from subsequent development. And then, any questions there?
Just one clarification. So in the next step that we've got, we could recommend to the city council to adopt the plan area fee and implement the program by collecting a fee at each new building permit. Because we have the deferred utility agreement, we don't have to go to the current developer, but it's every subsequent.
No, staff's position is that this development, the one here in the audience, would pay the plan area fee. And if there was no further development in the specific plan area and we did not collect other fees, right? And so we didn't have more people paying for the extension of water and sewer, any fee that was paid towards this, and if he had to extend the infrastructure, he would get a credit for those fees paid. There'd be like a reimbursement, basically.
So doesn't that create a timeline for the city to provide or install or use those funds to bring services beyond. So it would basically, to me, I'm hearing 5 years is basically that they have to connect to us, or 180 days of us bringing it. And I believe that when we were looking at the plan, through the plan review process for this specific project and discussing this document, I had asked if, or approximately that distance, if the city utilities came within the distance that they would have to connect within 180 days. I believe that distance was coming across 120. I believe that we had to come across 120 for them to be required to connect at that 180-day deadline. So we're not, essentially, we're not asking them to pay the $2 million or whatever he was referencing to come under, but we would be, if at that time we don't have the funds to bring it across, are they expected to come across at 5 years?
Yeah, per the approved development, the deferred utility agreement, yeah. No, I don't think so.
I just want to make sure I understand. So it says here, adopt the plan area fee and implement the program by collecting a fee at each new building permit. Well, this guy doesn't have a new building permit coming, so
Well-
this doesn't apply to him.
So he does have subsequent building permits within the 20-acre development. He started construction on one building. There's four or five.
Okay,
So there are subsequent.
And what Mr. Weber brought up about where the funds are going to be deposited, is there, what's the city's response to
This
that?
is an impact fee like any other impact fee, and is, applicable to appropriate state law, and would be held just like any other development impact fee, specifically for those purposes. So the other thing was about Caltrans. 120, we all know, is a Caltrans facility. It's a Caltrans roadway. Ultimately, it is sort of their responsibility. There have been many jurisdictions who work something out with Caltrans or fund improvements that they feel are more important than Caltrans's timeline. Not suggesting we do that. But yes, ultimately it is Caltrans facility. I've been here a little over a year. I've probably had a half a dozen or more direct conversations with the deputy director at District 10 regarding this specific intersection. Caltrans at this point is supportive of a signal project. However, it does not meet what are called warrants. It doesn't have the appropriate traffic counts, especially on the north-south leg, Brennan, and it doesn't, people do not like this, but it doesn't have enough sort of injury accidents to warrant the installation of a signal. And I know that sounds egregious, but that is where we are. I mean, we have to recognize Caltrans has millions, I think, miles of roadway and, many intersections. So they have a metric. So they support the intersection, it just doesn't meet warrants yet. What not meeting warrants means is we are on a list to access a smaller pot of money. If it met warrants, we would be on a smaller list that had more money available. We estimate at this point, it's a crystal ball, that it'll take us 3 to 5 years to get up that list to be able to be funded. So I don't want to say it's in the works, but we've done everything we can at this point until we meet warrants. Every time we get an injury accident out there, anytime there's a new development, we will share data with Caltrans so that they can rerun warrants to see if it meets now. So that's kind of excuse me, the status of the intersection. Sorry. That's all I have.
A cough drop. Would you like a cough drop?
I have several. They're varying, they're working sort of.
We would like to get back up.
I'm not going to rehash anything. There was a statement made after I'd come up here and just ask my questions. I want to be clear. You, in the deferred utility agreement, your understanding is that within any of those parameters, it is to the city's cost to bring utilities across the roadway?
No.
No, that wasn't what he said.
Number one.
Maybe I misheard you.
Yeah. Number one, within 5 years of on-site, if there was no future development, that would absolutely be the signer, Greg Yates' responsibility. Two, when 180 days from date of receipt of written notification from the city that sewer and water had been extended, I don't know what parameters that had been extended, but that would be then the city's responsibility.
If the city were to do that, if the city had the
were to
money,
do
which,
that.
okay.
And then number three, within 2 years, still Mr. Yates's responsibility and shared with someone, upon the approval of any development permit other than developers within the specific plan.
Well, as you all know, we're on a very tight budget. Projections have been perhaps insolvency of our reserve by 2028 because of the loss of Ford. There will never, ever be a city amount of money to bring utilities across 120. Understand that. It is going to fall over here if they, if they're still there, to do that. And that's why I had asked if all of those fees had included all of that work to bring it across, because they're going to be responsible for it. And, then they're going to have to pay again for this other fee. I mean, I'm just pointing that out to you, okay? Yeah, and everything else I'll.
Section 1.4 of the Deferred Utilities Agreement, reimbursement. To the extent developer is required to front costs for utility connections that will benefit or are oversized for the benefit of other properties, developer shall be entitled to collect reimbursement from benefited properties for the benefited property's fair share of improvement costs via any appropriate mechanism. So that's what I was referring to, right? It says, to the extent that the developer is required to front the cost for extending infrastructure, or that is oversized, if he's extending it, in this case, it would be oversized because it would serve the entire specific plan area, more than his 20 acres. Developer shall be entitled to collect reimbursement from the benefited property. So the fees collected, or, some agreement that they work out where they're funding it.
But that would require more development to have occurred or be planned for them to actually recover that cost.
Yep, that's how reimbursements work, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience?
The impact fees are calling for also another signal at Walnut and then something else at Irwin also. Is that correct? I think it's Brennan, Walnut, and
There's a right
right away
Irwin.
or some,
It's a right in, right out at Irwin.
and then was there something also on McHenry and Escalon Belota in there, which seemed kind of misplaced?
Right in the west leg.
120 in McHenry. Restripe and widen west leg. Which would probably have to be extended if 120 was extended on the west side of the tracks. That whole section would have to probably be extended, how it comes down and then comes as you get there.
That's not part of the business park, is it? I mean, like leading up to
The business
The
park would
tracks.
impact that area is what I'm assuming based on the call out for it. I'm sure there's a radius of impact.
Sort of within the sphere of influence, yeah, of that project.
So it would be improvements, additional improvements to Highway 120, which is Caltrans, which would be put on the developers outside of that area because it would cause an impact. And then you have the railroad to the south and the shopping center to the north. Is there room to widen those? I kind of assumed that was already done.
There should be existing easements for Caltrans.
Yeah, and typically these, these will go into new development areas to widen, in this case, it'd be to the north, so, yeah, there's room.
Because I know that we widened this road, I believe, after 2007. I'm not 100% sure. I was just trying to clarify whether or not that some of these improvements had already been done back then. So, okay.
I think one of the comments we hear a lot is, why is there not a turn signal from Brennan, sort of westbound, right, onto 120? And any widening is going to be in that vein, I believe, right? It's a turn signal. We're not talking going to 4-lane highway or anything like that. It's a turn signal so that people can access the commercial component of this. There's going to be one or two ins and outs. You're going to want to see a turn lane, just like you saw sort of westerly of us at, I'm going to forget the name, that new wine kind of spot, whatever that's called. I think you know where I'm talking about. Maybe not. Zinc House Farms. So that's, the level of widening that would be required in this case, and that would go into the property to the north to allow for that widening.
Okay, any other questions from the audience or comments? Roxanne?
Would you like to comment about Caltrans?
No.
Wait,
Yes, sir.
cut, run over.
Come on.
Roxana Gonzalez Schott, 1700 Riesling Way, and I'm excuse me, I just had braces put on my teeth today, so it's hard to talk. I own the property on the corner of Brennan and Highway 120, 13 acres of commercial, and I currently have strawberries being farmed out there. But, so when this road's widened, I would like to know how much of my property are they going to take to widen that?
We don't have the answer for that.
I mean, it's kind of narrow now, it's long, but the depth isn't there, so. I mean, it's not going to be a 4-lane, is it?
Elaine?
And how
Is
long does that
Brennan?
turn lane have to be away from, I don't know.
Yeah, it would need to be designed. I don't think that's determined yet.
Yeah, that's probably all Caltrans' decision.
They probably have standards to look, that you can look
We
into.
would coordinate with.
But we'd have to, yeah.
Okay. And then, they did put those 2 caution lights out there, so they did run electricity. It's on the corner of the property now. So I don't know if that would make a difference, since the infrastructure is already there, putting up lights. Possibly? He said it saved him about $300,000 just doing it that way. What they told me, so maybe we could check on that too. Reduce the cost some. Thank you.
Real quick about Caltrans. I know you're new, but Caltrans has been playing this game since 2010. There were warrants all supplied to Caltrans in 2010. It was my first day on the dais for the Planning Commission. John Abreu, Jeff Legero, Gary Haskin, and Danny Fox accompanied somebody else from local legislator's office, went to Caltrans. Caltrans says, we know you need it. We're on our 10th acting director. We don't have anybody who can make that decision. Had the warrants, it was there, they turned it down. A couple years later, it was, if we put that up there and we haven't widened that street because the shoulders aren't wide enough, that's a liability on us, and we can't afford somebody suing us here because we don't meet our own width standards. So just to understand, at Brennan, at Oklahoma, and Irving, to have a highway, you have to have a 4-foot wide shoulder. They don't. They don't even meet their own standards, so they're going to have to condemnation all of the property along that intersection in addition to all of the other costs associated with it. And, we got a Murphy turnabout. It's going out on Murphy and 120. French Camp's getting a signalized intersection out there, but we're not because it costs a lot of money and they just don't want to do it, and they never have. And it's been one excuse after another, and you're going to see it. You're going to hear them all until we get this company, Murphy Brothers, Flora, and the city going up to Caltrans and then going above them. We're never going to see an intersection out there. And it's a damn shame because it's already rated the lowest rating it can be. It's like an LOSF for that intersection without doing anything else, without this current business, without Murphy Park, just as is. And it was 2010 when this came up again on the Liberty Park area. It doesn't meet, it's an unsafe intersection, and they're not going to get anybody anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
We reviewed correspondences with Caltrans back to '09. In '09, it met 3 of 8 warrants. As far as I can tell, reviewing the correspondence, it has never met warrants. It did meet 3 of 8. That is not considered meeting. And so it still hasn't in this time frame met all the warrants necessary to.
There's 8 little check marks we have to make before we get something. Is there anybody online? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for discussion. I'm looking around. Anybody would like to start?
I can appreciate the amount of work that, what is it, EPS has put into this, Jess. It's somewhat disturbing that we don't have the backup documentation. So I'm going back and forth on that. That's all.
I agree with Commissioner Willis. I would like to see more of the effort that has been, apparently it's already been expended, the Nexus study, and I think that we might benefit from seeing the complete study, even if it's just verbiage. Someone who appreciates verbiage, that's how I understand things. So I'd kind of like to see that, see it in writing as well as the tables. The explanations that were given to me about my questions were for the most part satisfactory, although I do question how we extrapolate from calculations made on past figures going forward. But that's for everything in life. So I just would like to see a little more data before I would feel comfortable pushing this forward to the city council with a recommendation.
Yeah, I think it would, I don't know if it's going to change any opinions, but it would be, I think it'd be prudent to see the whole report. My worry is these prices could be under. even though it's incredibly expensive, that the cost in the end will even be more than this. Who knows?
I guess I would say that to see additional improvements at 1.5 million of an, as an increase as a whole, to have not been considered in 2007 is frustrating. But I think my biggest concern is impeding the goal. I mean, there was several community members for, several community members against this development in the Liberty Business Park. I've always questioned how the infrastructure would happen. I know that impact fees deal with these pretty often. I know that they exist. I don't know that they should hit a project that's in construction. I'm concerned that fees like this would slow down considerably future projects, which would then impact the specific starter project with this deferred construction agreement or tie-in agreement. I forget what the name is right now, but I'm concerned that presenting impact fees this high on even future projects, I just would like them just really looked at to make sure that it is essentially not too expensive and not too cheap either. All the concerns that I've heard. But also we have a construction project that's in underway, probably based on a budget, based on information presented at the time. And this, in my mind, severely shifts anyone's planning to build there. And I would just hope that whatever gets presented, because as you said, this is more of a courtesy review, more than a necessary process for us to even look at this, and a conversation starter. I would hope that whatever is presented to council is rock solid as far as the data goes. Not having the study referenced and stuff like that on this document, or the time of presentation, I would just want to make sure that it's clear the implications that it may have on development and on the group that's currently developing.
City of Escalon, I think, wants to ensure to its citizens and those that are going to go into this development that there's going to be ample funds to put all of the improvements that they need and want to make this development successful. I'm not comfortable with throwing out projections, because what is happening today, if you do a projection based on the inflation rate, 5 years ago, it looks totally different than it was 2 years ago. It looks totally different today. So you go out 8 years from now, who knows what that number is or how close that estimate's going to be. I'm concerned that I would like to get some more supportive data. Maybe it's in the narrative part of it, to see how they came up with the projection costs on this, and to make sure that it's correct. Because the last thing we want to do is to go forward and instead of being some odd percent in the hole, be 99% in the hole, and we have, one or maybe two developments out there, and that's it. I think we want to see some synergy going out there. We want to encourage growth. We want that kind of growth, not housing growth. So right now, I don't feel comfortable as it has been presented to pass that on to the city council. I don't know.
How soon could we get the background information?
Your meeting's in a month, we can have it by then.
And then how timely is that compared to sending it on to city council if we approve it?
We'd extend timeline about a month.
That impact, is that doable or? Is it road bump?
Everything is doable. I think there's some decisions has been brought up by at least one planning commissioner of, whether this is applicable to the current development project or not. There's certainly some time implications if it is. If it's not, there are less time implications. So there's no doable from staff standpoint, right? It's, we can bring it forward again with the Nexus study. We can rehash the projections and why they were done and how they were done to ensure the comfort level with the commission. And then, the commission can choose to pass it on or not. So there's no one right answer here. There's no one approach or one path. It's really, I think what's in front of you. It is a plan area fee for development within the specific plan area. And we are going to move forward with it, in the next several months, or we're not.
For this current project, how is that going to get decided? Through the council?
What do you mean?
What fees they pay?
So the specific plan called for a financing mechanism for the infrastructure. For various reasons, it wasn't brought forward in the past. And so now we're here bringing it forward for, in our minds, not only this project, but future projects. Was that your question, or more, did it go to Planning Commission versus City Council?
Well, just in general, the city doesn't have a funding source to do this infrastructure, so it has to come from the developers. And it sounds like we're trying to figure out, is this report accurate? Is it 10% too high, 20% too high, 20% too low? That's what we're relying on Jess for. I'm not quite clear. We have this deferred agreement that seems pretty clear. But then is Mr. Yates in his development, is it the discussion of how much they're going to pay in these fees? Is it the 2007? Is it this amount? That's what I'm not clear on.
So if this program and fee was adopted, it would be adopted with the 2007 or 2024 numbers. And on the next permit, or even the prior permit, there would be a fee for, the acreage or whatever, right? So it'd be 24. The only reason you see 07 is because you have to base the infrastructure on something. The infrastructure was originally detailed, and we have updated it. Our engineer has gone through the process of updating it, not just, the CCI. We've looked at new, totals, right, based on knowledge that they have in the construction area. You don't normally see specific plans, and then 17 years later, the sort of first development in there. It's not normal. And so, everything we're doing is we're looking back 17 years because the original infrastructure, you have to tie it to something. The original infrastructure was in that specific plan. You have a plan area fee that's based on a specific plan. That specific plan happened to be adopted in 2007. And so we are bringing that infrastructure forward. It's been updated. I would push back a little bit and say what we're doing shouldn't necessarily be questioning, the accuracy of the numbers. The numbers are the numbers. We have a set amount of infrastructure. It's going to cost this much in 2024. I guess we can debate, how it was done, but this is industry standard and best practices. And then you have a number of acres and land uses that you have to divide the total cost of the infrastructure. So that, again, is a relatively straightforward process, and it's done by professionals, according to how they have to do it. What we could talk about is a policy level decision of, we think it's too high, or, we don't want to charge the entire amount. And I can agree, okay, let's get the narrative. If that's the hang up of this commission, let's have the narrative, let's look at that. And we can, again, rehash with some time for you to have thought about it. We can rehash how those projections were done and how the cost estimates were done. This is great. I mean, I think this is a sound process. Sometimes we contemplate introducing these topics versus, a straight recommendation. In hindsight, maybe an introduction of this topic was what was appropriate. So it's an okay process, but I think we have experts. It's a defined process. I don't know if we should be questioning sort of, is it accurate or not? There is an industry standard and a best practice in that. But that's neither here nor there. So we'll bring forward at the next meeting the Nexus study, the full report, and we have the questions posed by the commission. We had the questions posed by the public, and to the extent that those weren't firmly or fully answered, we'll bring back that information at the next meeting.
Is it in our purview to be asking questions about how these fees might be collected? I mean, what occurs to me is if this is the only tenant at Liberty Business Park 5 years from now, and the city's been holding on to Mr. Yates' money, which if it's 38 acres, it's 1.5 million. If it's 20-something acres, it's around $1 million. For all that time, we could refund it to him, but why not hold it in abeyance and collect it when there are other people to help, help pay these costs? Is that something we could be discussing, or is that those kind of collection methods out of our purview or our ability to decide?
I think that
Generally, no. That's fixed by state law.
State law.
And the city's following.
State law requires us to collect these in advance, or not in advance.
at building permit.
And in this case, not in advance.
So the city's required to follow its process, right? And I can't really tell if the question is concerning like holding money in trust, or if it's about whether or not there has to be a refund issued at a certain point for the funds that were collected.
My question is, could we say, we are going to, this is what you're going to have to pay if the business park is built? If it's never built, and you're going to stay on that septic tank until you're no longer operating, and you've already got your roads in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then we just don't collect the fees. They're just there.
Okay, yeah, I understand your question, Commissioner Dunbar. I'd say that that's a policy decision that the council is supposed to be considering in their general oversight for all of the city's budget.
But it wouldn't be a recommendation from us.
No. Well, you could, it's not in your subject matter jurisdiction directly, right? It's not a zoning matter, it's not an FAR consideration, it's not a general plan issue.
And that's accurate, but your role is advisory to the council, and you can make a recommendation if you feel strongly about, any sort of issue. You really, in these choices, you pick your pain point. Is it an impact on development and minimize or discouraging development, or is it, the headache that may come with now trying to extract money 5 years later when the next development comes in and we need to get to a point where we develop infrastructure. You would love to see a specific plan done and development happen right away, right? It makes everything smoother and easier. You don't want to have these long, touch points of development, but that's the situation that we are in. So I think it's apt, we, right, will pick the pain point. Like, where are we going to be weak here? Where's there a chance that it's going to fail? That's what we will all decide as a commission, staff, and council.
Any other comments from the council? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that we continue this meeting, that we get the background documentation for the Nexus study, and then we can make a more informed decision as to whether to pass it on to the city council or not.
And you can continue it to the December 10th meeting.
December 10th meeting.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hear a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda,
Thank you, Jess.
thank you.
You all.
Next on the agenda is the approval of the changes in the AUD requirements.
ADU.
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 Okay. Thank you, Chair. So as it was read, we do have basically an ordinance amendment to Chapter 17 in the zoning code as it pertains to accessory dwelling units. State law has been passed, and all cities are expected to directly comply with the new state law as it pertains to ADUs. The state, over the last several years, has really emphasized housing, and ADUs is one of their favorite tools in terms of trying to produce more housing. And so over the years, you have seen the softening of requirements, the sort of adjusting of development standards, basically everything the state can do to try to make it easier to develop, maintain, keep ADUs, which is, and again, their sort of almost favorite tool to encourage more housing. So there are two bills that pertain to us. There's actually a third, but it's coastal related. There are two bills, an Assembly bill and a Senate bill, that were passed. And again, the state expects each city to amend their code prior to January 1st, whether we make that or not. It would be close. We could, but that's the expectation. So the first one, AB 2533, unpermitted ADUs and JADUs. I'll just sort of read this because it's complex. Current state law already prohibits a city from denying a permit to legalize an unpermitted ADU. So if someone built an ADU, they didn't get it permitted, they got caught, or they wanted to legalize it somehow, a city couldn't say just broadly, nope, we're not gonna permit it, you have to take it down. So there's already that stipulation. What this new state law does is increases the difficulty for a city to disallow a permit for an unpermitted ADU. And it specifically addresses here a couple of things, 3 things it looks like. Expanding that prohibition to also include JADUs, so junior ADUs are sort of space within a housing unit. So it's inside, but it's separated, an ADU versus an ADU, which is external, whether a garage or a standalone building. It moves the construction cutoff date from January 18 to 2020. So they're, again, decreasing the city's ability to disallow. And then it sort of adjusts the city's ability to say it's a health and safety issue and therefore we can't do it. There's specific findings that need to be had, and there's this sort of public process to say why it is not allowed and why it's substandard, which are kind of high bars to meet. So that's the first one. The second one, SB 1211, addresses 2 different things. Parking and the number of ADUs allowed on a multifamily parcel. So parking, again, it already is prohibited, state law, to require off-street parking spaces to be replaced when you convert a garage, a carport, or a covered parking space for an ADU. This now softens the language to prohibit a city from requiring replacement parking when an uncovered space is utilized for an ADU. Again, in increasing the ability for one to develop an ADU. Parking is hard to, construct sometimes, and this makes it easier. Multifamily ADUs, in essence, state law allows up to 2. Right now on a multifamily parcel, this would allow 8, or up to the number of units on the parcel. So if there are 6 units, you could have 6 ADUs. If it met all the development standards, 4-foot side setbacks, 4-foot back setbacks, those types of things. But it basically allows more ADUs on a multifamily parcel. That is really the long and the short of this item. It is state law. Some will question, do we have to follow state law to the T? In this case, yes, that is what they are requiring. The next question is usually, okay, well, what are the consequences if we don't? Local ordinance could become null and void, so we wouldn't be able to implement any sort of portion of our ADU ordinance. Maybe there's not a big impact there. Potential limiting or denial of state funding, potentially. You don't see it get to that point too often, but it's certainly up there or out there. Fines, cities could be fined. Lawsuits, of course, brought by individuals who want to see ADUs or, pro-housing advocates, that type of thing. Court-appointed receiver, I don't know if that's going to happen, but, someone comes in and, guarantees or ensures that we have a code that is consistent with state law. So those are some of the, potential downsides, not trying to scare anyone, and just, I know from everyone's perspective, okay, it says state law, but, what do we actually have to do? That is the end of the presentation. Happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
I just think it's funny. We have all this worry about drainage and permeable ground and, runoff, and we can cover a backyard as long as there's a 4-foot clearance in a bunch of these property or extensions of property. But I did have a question though about, it was something when I was initially reading this yesterday. Do we know, and this is hypothetical, but do we know if there are ADUs or JDUs or whatever they're called, that are unpermitted within our city? And is there a process to, or would those housing units have implications on our plan that we're working on as far as residents? Do we need to account for a quantity on that or an availability?
So the first part, we are not intimately aware of any unpermitted ADUs. I can share the city currently has about 8 ADUs in the city. Not a great deal, but maybe more than some people would have thought. We would probably discover an unpermitted ADU through some code enforcement activity. In fact, we get periodically a complaint from a neighbor who says, they built this ADU or this living space without permits, and, we'll look into it, and sometimes we verify that it has been permitted or whatever, right? So to come through some code enforcement activity, we are not aware of any that are unpermitted.
Yes, my question is there a benefit to the city to get something that was permitted other than the obvious safety for counts and whatnot?
Safety, I think, is, when you boil it down, that's really the city's role, right, to ensure the safety of the residents. So that would be the biggest one. Building code, fire code, it is all about safety for the most part. I think their second part of that question is, I guess, if we could count it, if we discovered that it was unpermitted and somehow became permitted, we could count it towards our RENA numbers, our
that's what I'm
housing
getting to.
needs. Yeah.
Because if there was a broadcast of this new situation that we're essentially under, if we did an outreach to the community, it's like, hey, come, we'll help you. You're not nobody's arresting anybody. We just want to make sure you're safe, kind of a deal. Would that outreach benefit? Because I know that type of outreach takes time and effort. And that was something that I was wondering as I was reading through this new
Governor
expansion.
Newsom isn't likely to say, Escalon, you're doing wonderful. Doing wonderful.
Not likely from the housing standpoint.
I did have one question, but it's sort of along these same lines, and it's incredible how detailed all this is in here. But the one thing I didn't note, there's just one comment about this does not prevent the city from enforcing compliance. Why on earth would they want to prevent it? A, why should they have to say that? But B, does the city feel, and I guess this is more a question for you, does the city feel it has the necessary tools to force compliance with some of these things? And if there's only 8 units that we know of, and maybe 2 or 3 that we don't, is there anything that we can do to make sure that these things are safe? That's my only concern. With all this new stuff apparently going into our rules, do we have any kind of way of making sure that we keep it safe? I mean, that we can inspect, that we can get in there and take a look if we need to?
There's no, I know the commission doesn't like these answers sometimes. If you think about all the living arrangements out there in Escalon, in Modesto, in LA, there are many, 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 many living arrangements. Some are safe, some are not, some are dangerous, some are not. We have code enforcement We have building inspectors, we have PD and fire who get into houses sometimes and can share with us, hey, there's something here going on. We do not have the ability, and nor do I think the general public would appreciate, sort of the government's right to, be able to peek inside your house and say, hey, let us see what's going on. Let us make sure it's safe. And I know where your question is coming from, and I don't mean to, sort of belittle it in any way, but that is an age-old question between, sort of the government and, people's personal property and how they handle things. If we are made aware of unsafe living arrangements, we absolutely have to act. It is our responsibility then to act. And, we are not a robust, staffed city. We don't have a lot of resources to do these things. But if we hear about an unsafe living arrangement, we will handle it in any way we can. But no city, whether they have robust staffing or not, can sort of ensure that there are no unsafe living arrangements out there. Just, that's an impossible task.
Yeah. But we have, this doesn't negate an ability to say you get notification of one that's been built that is possibly unsafe. This doesn't, though it does allow for previously built ones to become permitted, there is a process to that where they would have to come up to code, right? Yeah, so that's why I guess more or less why I was asking if it would be beneficial for us to present this as something. I mean, it's something I'm sure general public isn't thinking about.
Yeah. And that's the operative word, permitted. So if you're permitted, you go through a process. You submit plans, you get plan reviewed during construction or subsequent to construction, you get inspections, right? And it is deemed safe by the city. It doesn't say allowed by right.
Yeah.
So there's still a process to get it permitted to ensure it meets building codes, fire codes, all of that.
In that statement, so say I build one in my backyard that's right up next to the fence and don't permit it, then someone complains. Am I to tear it down? It sounds like this law says I can't, or you
Sounds
can't
like
make
it-
me.
Now,
Small
so
enough,
in
you
the
just-
permitting process, you would have to meet the development standard. And if the development standard was 4 feet, you'd have to shave 4 feet off the side of, however that looks like, or move it. You'd have to meet the development standard.
It would still have to get permitted.
Yes.
It's funny, we go through how many discussions have we had on RV structures?
Yep, I was thinking the same thing. Put a door and a bed in there, and there you go, you're all right.
Exactly. Yeah, so, okay, all good.
I know people who have ADUs and they're thrilled. I talked to somebody today who, when I told her what the discussion was, oh, yeah, I would love to have one, and my question was how many? And you said 8 before I even got to ask it, but
Do you know some of the 8, huh?
You know, one of the 8.
2.
2 of them.
Can we get a couple of plans, pre-approved plans similar to what the county has?
It's absolutely something that cities are doing. You pay for it, right? You pay an
Yeah.
architect or an engineer or something to prepare those plans. It's not been something that this council community has called for at this point, but if that was the purview of, or if that was the desire of the council, we certainly could. We just have to fund it.
Just a matter of, it would be additional generation of permit fees and building in the city.
If you viewed it that way, yeah, the easier you made it for people to build the ADUs, the more permits.
It seems that other cities are seeing it as a benefit, that's why I asked.
There are many cities who want to see housing and are proactively trying to seek housing. Not all cities are the same.
It is a public hearing, so you will want to open.
I'll open up the public hearing. Anybody in the audience would like to speak?
Okay, keep it down.
Anybody online?
Yeah.
Close the public hearing. Okay. I guess we've already discussed.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the attached resolution, attachment 1, and recommend that the city council adopt the proposed ordinance.
You have a
Second. Oh, yeah, I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Excellent. Thank you. Administrative matters.
None.
Audience?
One online.
Application?
Staff has no further communications. Oh, yes.
You had your chance.
So tomorrow, many of you will know, there is a community workshop. It is hosted by Florsheim Homes. It is not a city event. There are some questions on why hasn't it been advertised and all of that. Notices were sent out to residents within 1,200 feet of the property. Were they sent late? Again, that's up to whoever decides. That's up to, who judges that. It is not a city meeting. We have sort of encouraged, I think, the developers to hold that meeting so we can answer questions in advance of, planning commission. So you can, have some dialogue and some thought. And so I think there's some benefit there. They have chosen to do that. So tomorrow, 6:30, community center for the proposed 72-unit residential project. There's been some thought that they're senior. They're not necessarily senior. There's been some thought that they're zero lot line. They are not zero lot line. They are 6,000 square feet plus. That is the city standard. In fact, the average square footage of the lot is 7,300. They are market rate homes. The city has an inclusionary housing ordinance. It's basically an affordable housing ordinance that says 10 to 15% of the units must be affordable, or you pay an in lieu fee. There's varying degrees of affordable, from extremely low income, moderate, and above moderate. These would be affordable to those who make 100 to 120% of the area median income. That is what they are proposing at this rate. There's pros and cons, right, to having them lower for lower income residents, right? There's that, kind of push and shove about what people think of the affordable units. So just share that. But this community workshop is being held obviously in advance of any planning commission item. It's really an opportunity for staff and the developer to share information. It'll be developer sharing information prior to finalizing the review of the application. Of course, we've looked at it and provided some initial comments, but finalizing the review. And then once we finalize the review, we'll bring it on to planning commission first, and then city council.
Can't remember, do we have Florsheim Homes in Escalon now?
No.
None.
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I recall.
Yeah. We did receive the building package for Countrywood Cottages. You may recall a project that you, I think there was some time there, some gap in time, as he was, I believe, selling some property to be able to finance this project. But he's now gotten to the point where he submitted plans. We are reviewing those. We probably get through it by the end of this year, and he could be eligible to start constructing, kind of first of the year. That doesn't mean he's financially there or ready, but that's a general time timeline of what could transpire.
A lot of people ask about it.
Yeah.
So if it's possible, what's the best guess, do you think, that Florsheim will be in here? Planning Commission.
In front of the Planning Commission? It's been, this is not an editorial comment or a qualitative comment about the project. It's been a project plan for a very long time. It's been planned for a very long time. Council at some point have sort of pre-annexed it or grandfathered it in against the annexation moratorium. So from that standpoint, it should come before the Planning Commission. It's consistent with, sort of the expectation, the general plan. But, we've all seen many things happen in kind of the community venue where projects don't end up moving forward.
Anything else from staff?
My only question would be, is there any chance that the meeting tomorrow might veer off into other subject matter,
Like what?
like Highway 120 and Brennan?
I have to imagine it will. Absolutely.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could steer it that way.
It's been a while, in June, so good to see everybody.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that $50.
Well, since the last time we met was in June, it's the first opportunity in public I can congratulate Jalen for his
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
position. Okay. If there's no other communication, it's adjourned.
Thank you.
This took longer than I thought.
What,